Canner, thank you. Yasher Koach.
Bruchim.
Nice to share the Bima. Naomi, thank you for coming up to join Mom and being our choir. I don't think people realize Canner had to reset the entire liturgy because of not being able to use the choir because of social distancing. That only took, 1,000 hours or so, right, Canner? But the good part is Canner was practicing all summer here on the Bima, which is right next to my office, and there were a few melodies I just couldn't get out of my head, Canner, so thank you for that. For those of you who are here within our sanctuary, thank you for coming. On March 11th, when we closed the building and our schools, I really was the only one in the building, I think, from March 11th till we were able to partially reopen in mid-June for some of our staff and then nursery school. And I felt the need to at least be here in the shul for myself, but for everyone who I wanted to be with me. And that first day we opened the doors and some others came in, it really was striking. And I think we take for granted sometimes that we have the ability to go to shul. And not being able to go is hard. And for those who are watching streaming, I'm sure you feel that challenge. But we are here, whether physically in this building or spiritually connected by our invisible strings of love, we are standing together, even if we're social distancing. So I know this past year, we felt a range of emotions. See if any of these strike home. Feelings of anxiety, denial, depression, fear, loss, panic, tears. I ask because I felt all of these challenging feelings, especially since the beginnings of COVID-19 and living life with the pandemic. So I want us to take a deep breath, if you can, within your masks, okay? Try. Take a breath. It's been a wild ride. Now also, how many of you can recall these feelings this past year? Excitement, happiness, hope, joy, laughter, optimism, relief. Even in the midst of these challenging days, I imagine most of us can recall these feelings as well. For all of us, life has been the proverbial emotional roller coaster. Up, down, up, down, up, down. Lately, that's been the ride through our life. Now, personally, I'm not a fan of amusement park roller coasters. But I've always appreciated the grandmother from the movie Parenthood. Did you ever see that movie, right? Steve Martin. You might recall that when her grandson was feeling especially troubled, the grandmother told him about her experience on a roller coaster. She said to him as he was troubled, "I was 19 and your grandpa took me on a roller coaster. Up, down, oh, what a ride." Now, Steve Martin, the grandson, rolled his eyes and with obvious sarcasm said, "Oh, what a great story." But the grandmother ignored his tone and his words, and she went on. "I always wanted to go again. You know, it was just so interesting that a ride could make me so frightened, so scared, so sick, so excited, and so thrilled all at once. Some friends who went with us didn't like it, so they went on the merry-go-round. It's safer because it just spins around and around in familiar circles. I like the roller coaster. There's more to learn from it." We are living a roller coaster life. We experience the ups and downs, the twists and turns, the flips and flops of a bumpy and scary ride. And it's been especially a rough ride of late. Life is the most unpredictable roller coaster. It has peaks of joy and valleys of heartache. It can lift us to the highest high, then swiftly drop us to the lowest low. We've all had the experience of going from a great day to a terrible one in one 24-hour period. And fortunately, we've all experienced going from a terrible day to a great one. And that's how I describe our current experience of life with COVID-19. But it also describes the historic experience of the Jewish people. 2 months ago, we observed Tisha B'Av. It's the day we commemorate all the tragedies that befell the Jewish people throughout our history. One of the liturgical pieces we sing on Tisha B'Av compares and contrasts the miracles and the wonders that occurred for the Jews, while simultaneously recalling the stories of grief and the tragedies of persecution. In our history, our people have reached great heights, and we also know how it feels to plummet to the lowest depths. Our reality is life on a roller coaster, sometimes smooth, sometimes bumpy, sometimes flying high, sometimes crashing to new lows, and everything in between. My Bubby, my grandmother of blessed memory, she used to say in Yiddish, "Man tracht und Gott lacht." Man plans and God laughs. My mom of blessed memory, she added her own commentary. She'd say, God only tests us to the limits of what we can withstand. Now, later I learned this was my mother's Jewish version of Rudyard Kipling's words, which she plagiarized. Because Kipling said, if you can meet life with triumph and disaster and treat those two imposters just the same, you are a better man, a better person than most. There will never be a moment in our lives when we see huge hilly obstacles rise in the distance that our hearts don't rise and fall, that our minds don't race and panic, and that our stomachs don't churn. The quality of our lives is defined by how we manage life's roller coaster. The road of life is unpredictable. We all live with different levels of uncertainty in our personal lives, in our professional lives, in our communal lives. A midrash tells how King Solomon once searched for a cure for all his troubles. He assembled his wise council and challenged them for an answer. They meditated for a long time, and they gave him this advice: make a ring for yourself and engrave on it the words, Gam zeh ya'avor. This too shall pass. King Solomon followed their advice. He had the ring made, and he wore it constantly. Each time he felt sad, depressed, or overwhelmed, he looked at the ring. And seeing the ring changed his mood, and he would feel cheerful. Through the centuries, Jews kept their eyes open, knowing, Gam zeh ya'avor, this too shall pass. Many Jews still wear a piece of jewelry with the words inscribed, Gam zeh ya'avor, this too shall pass. The great Jewish philosopher Moses Maimonides, he agreed that wearing Solomon's ring has a powerful therapeutic effect. Gam zeh ya'avor, this too shall pass. This reminds us to appreciate and celebrate every good moment. And when times are bad, it reminds us not to give in, because this too shall pass. When we apply this to COVID-19, we know that over the centuries, humanity has encountered many health-related epidemics. Here are just a few examples. Mid-13th century began the 100-plus years of the Black Death. In 1852 began the 8 terrible years known as the Third cholera pandemic. In 1889, the Russian flu began a global pandemic. In 1918, we had the most severe pandemic in recent history. It was the first we heard of the H1N1 virus. We called it the bird flu. In the early 50s, the polio scourge had its crescendo. My father was a victim. In the late 50s, there was the Asian flu. More recently, before the present pandemic, there was, of course, the HIV/AIDS crisis. In all of these horrible global health situations, millions of individuals became sick and too many died. There was a loss of life, significant disruptions to the economy, to the social order. But after each health crisis, there were positive lifestyle changes and the introduction of new health practices and habits. The changes were institutional, cultural, and operational practices, and the changes made the world a better place for us and for future generations. Even in dark times, we know Gam Zeh Ya'avor. This too shall pass. When we face darkness, we keep our eyes open and gather our thoughts. We assess the possibilities. We take action. It's also true that the emotional experience of life as a roller coaster is something that connects us and makes us stronger. It works to reach out for support when we feel scared, sad, or lonely. It's good to reach out for comfort and companionship from family and from friends. Crisis, anger, fear, and pain are indications to change our circumstances in order to feel better. There's no doubt that COVID-19 is a crisis for Jewish communal life. Just think of the Passover Seders we tried to hold a few weeks after the pandemic began. I'm sure, like many of you on Passover, I look forward to the entire family sitting together. In my family, I have a brother, one who's Orthodox, one who's liberal Reform, and the other is an avowed atheist. And yet, every Passover, our mutual desire is to be together as a family. And like you, we share the story of our exodus from Egypt, the story that marks the birth of the Jewish people. This year, there was no multi-generational feast for us. So many of us sat by ourselves or sat with those who lived under the same roof. I'm sure, like many of you with senior loved ones, you experienced this. Roseanne and I spent time prior to that Seder trying to teach my father to use Zoom. Anyone have this experience? It was a total failure. And I'm thinking my father's watching this streaming, but I suspect he couldn't get on tonight. It was a total failure. And 6 months after all of this has begun, my dad still calls 6 p.m. every Friday night before our service. And as he says to me, I want to Zoom it on the TV. How do I do it? Now, we know this sermon's being streamed live for the few of us who can be here tonight. And we're doing this because of the 99% of our congregation, our temple members, who can't attend High Holy Days in this sanctuary. We're only allowed up to 100 in a sanctuary that could seat over 1,200 who will be able to be here tomorrow. And like you, there'll be strict rules to follow, assigned pods, wearing masks, temperatures taken at the door, contact tracing info in place, forms to fill out in triplicate, and so on. And since the best case scenario is that we won't have a vaccine widely available for all of us until mid-2021, next year's Seders will probably be just as challenging. And we can only hope for the best for next year's Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. In our Temple Sholom community, we have members with strained financial issues. It's been a challenge to figure out how to support our members while retaining fiscal viability for our congregation, but we will do it. We've figured out how to offer quality online opportunities for Jewish education and programming, even though we know it's not the same as gathering in person. The idea of this uphill challenge makes everyone's stomach drop a little, and the naysayers are out in force. I've read too many opinion pieces saying the coronavirus will kill off American Jewish institutional life. These people lament that there's no viable Jewish communal future. Now, through the ages, we've heard Jews falsely prophesize the end of Judaism. After the Shoah, after the Holocaust, which saw the extermination of 1/3 of world Jewry, half of European Jewry, there were so many Jewish doomsayers that in 1948, philosopher Simon Rabinowitz wrote an address to challenge this Jewish pessimistic idea. He titled his speech, "Israel, the ever-dying people." Rabinowitz told us how throughout the ages, false prophets have declared that Jewish people are constantly on the verge of ceasing to exist. Now, I wonder if in reality, many who view the Jewish people as ever dying use this approach as a coping mechanism. Maybe they believe that if they forecast the worst, we can prepare to do what is the best. From this perspective, worst case problem deserves best case solution. I suggest we embrace the emotional roller coaster of our communal lives as Jews today. Let's anticipate the worst so we prepare for it. Let's allow our minds to panic at the possibility of the roller coaster's huge drop ahead so we can be proactive. Unlike the Jews of many generations before us, we live in a country that has created a golden age for Jews. In 1916, when Temple Sholom was founded, 10 Jewish families built the foundation for our future. Alexander created that wonderful film at the Gala, our centennial. I hope many of you see it. We still have it, the long version, short version. They're both on YouTube, and now we know how to find YouTube, right? What did we learn from those 10 Jewish families? They supported each other. Even during the Depression, the downslide in this community, those Jews who were struggling purchased land in 1933, the same land we own now that's for our local Jewish cemetery, during the height of the Depression. This was gentleman agreements country. Jews had struggling to buy real estate, and yet those local Jewish pioneers in our community still cleared the way for us. Beginning 40 years ago, we began to grow. When Rabbi Silverman, our emeritus, came here in 1981, there were 220 households. In 1995, we were almost double that. That's when I came. And now, 2020, we are almost triple what we were 40 years ago. We have the privilege of being our best Jewish selves, with a height of freedom that is beyond what our people have known before the start of the mid-20th century. We all hold tickets to the roller coaster's wild ride, and it will be good to take this ride together. We are at the highest point of the roller coaster. We must hold hands to ride this out together, united. United as we embrace and preserve our sacred Jewish values and traditions. Perhaps before COVID-19, we had the luxury of taking life for granted every day. Everything is different now. Appreciate each turn and every bump. We yearn for the simple pleasure of being together in one physical place. Because when we can't have something, it's often what we want most. So this new year, fasten your seatbelt. Prepare for the ride of your life. Since we all can't be together in the temple yet, participate in an online service. Participate in an online temple class. Aside from the spiritual benefits of a deepened Jewish life, it's widely accepted that faith and health are connected. Study after study has shown that those who participate regularly in communal religious life in person and online reap the benefits of increased social ties. And the studies say that communal religious engagement leads to the lower risk of death. In the near future, I hope we're going to be able to hug, to sing, to chant, to physically hold hands, to physically stand together in our temple sanctuary. I miss it. But in the meantime, we're on this roller coaster ride together. Let's embrace the ups and downs, the joys and valleys of this ride together. For now, we'll sit 6 feet apart. We'll wear masks. We'll respect social distancing guidelines. In harmony, we'll ride the rises and the dips that define our journey. We'll ride together as one people. Am Yisrael Chai. Od Avinu Chai. All of us know those words. Am Yisrael Chai, Od Avinu Chai. The Jewish people live, and we will live forever. L'Shana Tova, a happy, healthy, peaceful new year, and let us say, Amen.